The strain.
Is Tamara here?
The Strangers Chapter 3, the latest and hopefully the final film from this newest trilogy of the Stranger films. Now, I have a variety of thoughts, some good, some bad, and some in between. So be sure to leave your thoughts down below in the comment section. Starting off with the positives, even though in my out of theater reaction I mentioned that the story, the plot, and some of the circumstances within this film were very confusing and convoluted, I do have to admit that structurally, it is the most unique and intriguing Strangers film that we've gotten thus far. So, structurally speaking, the film jumps from Maya and her struggle with the strangers, to the sheriff character, to Maya's sister and her brother in law searching for her and trying to find answers about her whereabouts and her disappearance, and jumping back and forth from the past and the present and seeing the origins of the strangers and how they became the monsters that they are. So to me, that really kept the story feeling very dynamic and refreshing as compared to the last film, which was essentially just one long chase sequence. And honestly, I found the flashback sequences to be the most compelling parts of the film, mainly because we get a peek behind the curtain. We get to see the origins of these characters, how they developed their MO, how they chose their victims to start out with. And seeing them commit these horrific acts as children and teenagers just added this eerie visual to go along with the horrific acts themselves. And now I'm fully aware that that was one of the biggest criticisms aimed at this new trilogy of films was the strangers are simply supposed to be that. Strangers. We're not supposed to know who they are. We're not supposed to know why they do what they do. That's what made that first film back in 2008 so horrific and scary, was the fact that it could happen to anybody. That these individuals chose them just because they were there. But for me personally, seeing the genesis of these characters and the development worked for me in some capacity. Additionally, I really appreciated how the film reconfigured the meaning of the title, The Strangers. In previous films, it has always been a title card of the statistics of murders within the United States. And every single time it would end stating that the murders were typically committed by strangers. In this film, it opens up basically the exact same way. However, it states that a certain percentage of the victims are strangers. Again, tiny detail, but I did appreciate that spin on the definition and that slight hint of self-awareness, since in this trilogy of films we've learned more about the strangers than the victims themselves. The second positive I have is the cinematography. And really, I'm not 100% certain of why. I just found myself in multiple instances sitting back in my seat and going, wow, I like this shot. I like the way this is framed. I like that camera movement right there. And I looked, it's the exact same cinematographer from the previous two films. So I'm not sure if it was a variety of locations and that's what made it more compelling or maybe easier for the cinematographer to do more interesting things with the camera versus the previous films, which were essentially one location and predominantly shot at night. But it was just an element that I really appreciated this time around. Now moving on to the mixed aspects, and for this I have two. The first being Maya joining the strangers. Now, in the teaser at the end of the second film, and the marketing material for this film, there was a lot of intrigue into the fact of, or the question rather, why Maya would join the strangers. And when I first saw it, my mind immediately went to Fate of the Furious back in 2017, I believe, when in a similar fashion, the marketing material focused on the fact that Dom was going rogue and turning against his family and his team. And similar to that film, the answer is pretty underwhelming. Not because the answer was unsatisfying, but because I do not feel like they do enough with it. Again, spoiler alert. In the previous film, Maya killed one of the strangers. So in this one, the strangers force her to don the mask, to knock on the door, to ask if Tamara is home, and ultimately make her participate and commit one of the murders. So this scene was very tense and really psychologically gruesome and vile to think about. But it only lasts 5 to 8 minutes. The entire intrigue of the film is resolved within that short window of time. Now, I'm not sure if it would have been better to make the scene a little bit longer and mess with the psychological element and the psychological damage that would do, or maybe have 2 additional scenes where they force Maya to go a little bit further with each horrific act. Maybe the first time she knocks on the door, the second time she ties up the victims herself, and the third time is when they force her to commit the horrific act. Sadly, the filmmakers do not do that here, and I just feel like it would have been more effective if they went with that psychological aspect and were more subtle instead of loud jump scares and shock value, but that's just my personal preference. Now, the final mixed aspect that I have is the visceral and brutal nature of the strangers. As seen in the trailers and the marketing material, the strangers are busting through doors, they're essentially bum rushing their victims. Now, on one hand, this is an intense visual, but on the other hand, it disregards that original film and what it sought out to do. The original film, in my mind, what made it so effective was the fact that there were no loud jump scares, that I recall at least. That's not where the tension and the horror was. It was almost like a Michael Myers element, where the strangers were just standing in the background, and you were forced to sit there and watch the main characters oblivious to the fact that someone was in the house with them. So if you prefer that first film, this may not work for you. If you didn't prefer it, this may change your tune just a little bit. And now the negatives, and boy are there a few. To highlight a couple, as mentioned previously, the plot is very confusing and convoluted. This is a representation of what my face was throughout that entire film.
You killed her.
Everything I've ever cared about is gone.
And it's not necessarily the story itself, it's the character motivations, which in this film are practically non-existent. Characters do things for no logical reason whatsoever.
You know, I just do things.
For example, again, spoilers. Maya is able to get her hands on a weapon and take out one of the strangers. But instead of taking out the other stranger while her back is turned, she just sits there for no logical reason. And along with that same circumstance, instead of killing Maya for killing what we are led to believe was a lifelong friend for one of the killers, they let her live. And then there's the character of Maya herself, who becomes an emotionless zombie throughout half of the movie. At one point in the film, the strangers have someone she cares about deeply at knife point, and she just has a blank stare. No emotion whatsoever. And it's infuriating because they give no logical explanation for it. And with that, some plot points are flat out laughable. At one point in the story, one of the killers is alone with a police officer in this fairly public building. No mask or anything. He ends up killing this officer, and then in the following scene is taking his body outside in broad daylight in a trash bag. And I kid you not, I audibly laughed because it is so absurd. And on top of that, the strangers ride around in the pickup truck wearing their mask, going to public gas stations and motels in what we're led to believe is a small town, where everybody knows everybody and nobody finds it odd. And lastly, the ending, again, severely underwhelming. Maya is let go for whatever reason, and she finally snaps out of it. Instead of running away, she decides to turn back for one last confrontation with the strangers. And at this point, I was like, okay, now we're making some sense. She's going to go back. This is going to be epic and one big final confrontation. Let's do it. And I was excited because in my mind, I was fully expecting the director to go in the direction that Scream did back in 1996 and have Maya use the killer's techniques against them. I was fully expecting for her to go up to the door and go, "Is Tamara home?" and mess with the killers psychologically before she took them out. Unfortunately, we don't get anything remotely close to that. Instead, she just goes back and, again, blank expression on her face, shoots one, stabs the other, and the film tries to imply that she's just like the strangers now. And no, does not work for me at all. But overall, guys, I cannot endorse this movie. It's not terrible. I've definitely seen worse. But for me, on the very rare occasion that I ever revisit this film, it will simply be as background noise while I do something else. Thank you very much for watching. Please like, share, subscribe. Drop a comment down below. Let me know your thoughts on this new film, what you liked, what you didn't like, and for the sake of argument, put your favorite or what you consider to be the best Strangers film in this franchise. Take care, and God bless.